The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
Hello there, and welcome in for another episode of the Minnesota Socccer Podcast, coming to you live from the studios, the Cumulus Media Studios, the Zone Coverage home for all of our podcasts. I'm your host tonight, Nick Hallett, longtime host and co-host and all-around good
Played
guy.
all the roles, yeah.
All-around good guy. For the Minnesota Socccer Podcast. Alongside me tonight, I have our trusty producer and head honcho of Zone Coverage, Mr. Tom Schreier. Good to have you with, Tom.
Yeah, David Naylor is on assignment. He is, I think people know this, lives in Iowa. Actually, this is a commitment to covering the team. We'll come up to cover United, but he is covering the Timberwolves, who are in Ames. Playing
Random,
a preseason game.
but
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So if you like his work, and he does a great job with the recaps, obviously you do the player ratings, he will be covering the Iowa Wolves, so the minor league team. I don't know what the cross section between United fans and Iowa Wolves fans are, but
yeah,
he is going to be down there, and he will continue to do links as well. He did a good job covering them. So multi-talented. He's out in Ames. He will be back next week, I believe.
Yep, we'll get Nene back next week, back in our regular set, as we really start to break down and get into Minnesota United going forward. I've said that for the last few episodes of the show, that this is start to become all eyes towards next season for obvious reasons. This season has for a while looked like it's going to go the way that it was going to go. The team was going to fall short of postseason play, but what does all this mean going into 2019? What does this player mean going into 2019? What does this decision from Heath mean? What is this team's record? What is this team's frailties? What does this team's strengths look like going into the next MLS campaign? So I think that's where these remaining games, although now essentially leveled as irrelevant because of the elimination from postseason play this weekend, I think these final three games still have a lot of interesting things for us to delve into, discuss, and keep our eye on. If you did, for whatever reason, miss Minnesota United action this weekend, it was definitely something as a United fan you'd be fine missing, because it was a disastrously poor performance from the Loons away from home, as you'd expect. Tom, you can check the stat for me, but I believe that puts the road record down to 1-13 or 1-14 on the season.
I think it's 1-13-1. There must be an Italian.
Yeah, there might. Yeah, that makes sense too. Something along those lines. Either way, hot garbage. But it is still flabbergasting that in no way has this team ever found a way this season to buck this trend, to play decently on the road. And if memory serves, their lone road win came in like week 3 of the season, and that was when this team still had guys like Ethan Finley and Kevin Molino. No surprise that has hindered this team aggressively throughout the campaign, but also in stark contrast when they play on the road.
Yeah, they are 1-13-2, so 2 ties.
2 ties on the road. So last night was a 5-1 drubbing at the hands of the Philadelphia Union. And again, no matter what team you're facing, and again, no matter what team you are in the MLS, to do what they do on the road is unacceptable. And frankly, is one of the, as I wrote in the player ratings at zonecoverage.com, you can check that out and see what I thought about all the player performances, including Heath's performance, as we do every week. Zonecoverage.com or at ZoneCoverageMN on Twitter. For this road home split issue for me is definitely going to be one of the top 3 things looked at going into next year, and one of the top 3 things I would venture to say could cost Adrian Heath his job. So him sorting all of that out is definitely got to be high on his priority list. I mean, if you're a head coach, and what's so problematic for Heath is that a home road split, a home road divide like that, like it's one of the things that gets directly pointed back at a head coach. That's the one, like you really can't deflect to the GM. And I've talked to some inside sources, and I didn't even tell you guys that off air. You know, a lot of times we prep for the show. I tell you,
you're
guys,
gonna surprise us here. Go ahead.
Tell you guys about the dates I went on. I tell you about the new soccer news I know, and we skipped a lot of that. But I had two really good inside sources I can't reveal, but I talked to during this week about Minnesota United stuff. Got some really good insights for right now and going forward. But one of the things that they said was that they felt actually that Manny Lagos, essentially the GM of this team, should be the guy on the hot seat more so.
Here's why that makes sense to me. I think it's funny looking at your ratings. Heath is either like 4 or below or like 7 and above. You are very rarely middle of the road with Heath. And there's certain things we like about him, how candid he is and all this. And he continues to point perhaps at the front office saying, I want more talent. And we talked about maybe with more talent, they'd start out on the road better, that they're not on their heels consistently. And before I continue, how would you assess GM and how the roster has been? Is this as expected? Is this worse than considering that Molino and Finley went out early? And I think that's pretty meaningful. Yes,
and that's a huge caveat for both Heath and Lagos when you're kind of grading them. But right now, you'd have to say roster construction grade is. I mean, if I could put a number on it to go along with the player ratings, you'd have to put it right in the middle of the road at like a 5, which is kind of sketchy. That'd be the word. That's kind of the word that comes to mind. Is relatively sketchy. He's made decisions that you're like, okay, I see what you're thinking there, but there's a lot of room for question. A lot of these decisions. Trading Chris Ramirez has been questioned by everyone, and
should be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because he only received money back in addition to trading away your club's leading scorer for the past 3 years.
And the guy who was, going back to the minor league days, the face of the franchise, right?
Yeah. Former NASL MVP, etc. Trading him and bringing in someone like Angelo Rodriguez, who people are really unsure about. His career arc hasn't been something that you can point to and say, this guy is obviously going to be a success in the MLS. So to trade away arguably a face of the franchise for someone who has a shaky record as a top goal scorer is a cause for concern for Lagos and now Heath as well. But other decisions, I mean, taking this long to get someone like Darwin Quintero into the team, susceptible from Lagos. Bringing in someone like Vadim Demidov and the roster that he brought in to their first ever campaign and how much that clearly floundered, setting a record for most goals allowed ever in an MLS campaign. That doesn't bode well for the GM. And I think it's such an interesting discussion, and I've been looking at this recently across sports. I'm kind of sick of it. I'm sick of the trend that the head coach always gets the axe first, because I think that's
the GM
lazy.
usually has multiple coaches. Yeah.
So GMs usually survive multiple coaches.
Yeah.
And I think I'm starting to feel more strongly that might be a lazy trend. And I give high credit to the Wild for not firing Boudreaux and finally moving on from Fletcher.
Yeah.
I think that's the right decision, and it's just so often it's just so much easier to just change the guy who runs practice.
Yeah, the line you always get is that you can't fire all the players, so you fire the coach.
Right.
But the irony in that is the person who assembled the players is not the coach; it's the GM, unless you get into tips. But I mean, it typically is not, and nor really should it ever be. But I could see why. I think going back to the game briefly, I get why this would be an issue for Heath. Not only is this a road record that no one has answers to, right? He kind of joked in a press conference saying, if you figure it out, let me know, right?
Right.
And, but it's a game that it's an elimination game. And I've continued to say, maybe it doesn't matter as much for building the brand, because you do need to establish a fan base here, right? maybe because they're better at home, that's the memories people take away, and they're less inclined to worry about the road record, especially if it's a West Coast game or whatever. But for this, I think about that night, Saturday night, right? You have baseball playoffs going on. Wild just started. College football, on and on and on. I went to turn on that game, and literally 8 minutes in, there's a goal, right? And then another one comes close enough. And I'm like, even for me, I'm like, why would anyone be watching this on a night unless you really just don't care about any other sports? It just is not a good product. And if you tune in to watch it, this will stick in your mind because it was an elimination game, and even though it's on the road, I mean, how good is Philadelphia? Is this a...
And that's the thing, and we've kind of gotten into our rants earlier, which is fine. That's fun. Yeah. I enjoy that. I think most people prefer that. But the details of the game are such that this game was a must-win for United to stay alive in postseason. Philadelphia needed this win to clinch postseason, but they have games remaining, so they could have lost this game and clinched later. But what a lot of people, Minnesota fans who maybe don't have the wide angle lens of the entire MLS on wouldn't realize is that Philadelphia is very good.
Okay.
One of the better teams in MLS this season, and coming into this matchup, absolutely red hot, unbeaten one loss in their last 9 games heading into this. So now 1 loss in their last 10, and they looked it. I mean, they also have a player, Picault, one of their outside mids, who is received now his first ever call-up to the U.S. men's national team. And I think he's a microcosm of what you see from Philadelphia when you watch them play, is there's a lot of guys on the up and up.
And he had those 2 goals, right? First half.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know this. They quietly have the league leader in assists. They're number 10. And he's quietly an MVP candidate even. So this Philadelphia team, and
they're capable of beating you 5-1.
Absolutely, and it's far from Minnesota United not to have had bad losses to bad teams. They've done that this season. We've seen that.
But we've seen.
But this was not that. This was a very good team that smacked them around.
And they have beaten good teams at home, or at least played them tough.
Yes.
Like we see that kind of Jekyll and Hyde situation. I just think. I don't know how many people know Philadelphia. They're, East Coast team. I don't know how many people know the league very well or all that. Just to me, it's like, man, this just this is when people get fired. Is when it's like, again, I think if this is the 3rd year of Allianz Field, and I think we're saying that right now. I know someone mentioned on the podcast we weren't before. If this is the 3rd year you're established in your own stadium, the honeymoon phase is wearing out. I think someone's head rolls almost immediately as soon as you're eliminated from the playoffs and like.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
We've said that for a while. Halfway through next season is when stuff's going to hit the fan. And decisions are going to start to be made. Yeah,
and I look at this and I kind of go, take a deep breath, take a step back. This is an expansion team. They're still playing in a football stadium. There's all sorts of things that allow maybe for a little more leeway.
Yeah, and that's true. But you do, the leash will eventually run out. And again, back to my point, I am, like I said with the Wild, I think it's good to start, you need to take the GM out too.
Yeah.
It's not always the coaching. And Heath a lot of times does some really brilliant things, has shown this team, as you pointed out, has beaten really, really good teams with Minnesota United at home. And so but that's the problem with this home road split for Heath. It's how do you not connect that directly to the coach? Because it's not the GM. He's given you those players that you take to the road games and that you use at the home games. And the problem is there's a big difference between the home and away games. And that has to fall on Adrian. It has to. Because it's him managing each guy.
Yeah.
It's him dictating strategy. It's him dictating lineups. So you have to take that. Again, I'm telling it from Heath's perspective. He's got to get that sorted out because that comes straight to him.
Well, what game was it?
And it's so important and so interesting because one of the other main narratives of Heath all this year has been him pointing to the front office and being like, yeah, we lost again, but I need more players. Yeah, we did all right, but I'm hoping to add more players. He's always hitting that line, which, again, you must start to wonder, too, is there a contentious relationship between him and Lagos, and it might be. So I think for Adrian, this is going to reflect on him.
How long have those two worked together?
The last, year and a half, essentially.
Because I go back, I think there may be some tension there. I think the funny thing about this is he's probably not wrong. He'd go, hey, if I had a better team, I'd implement a better strategy. Because this game looked like all the other away games, right?
Oh
we talked, right? And what game was it? A few games ago, I'm talking an away game, you and Naylor suggested that, maybe it was you just alone, suggested that they should go crazy. Like they should implement like a... maybe it was an extreme attack strategy or move players up.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I know what the result is. It's a little bit of the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. You're like, I know what the result is if you do this. I know that it's likely that if I implement whatever this more radical strategy is, that you just get your head beat in. But this is what happened here in Philadelphia, right? And why not maybe shake it up? And that I can see blaming the coach, because as much as he can only deal with the players who are in front of him, you hate making a change only to make a change, but there is some sense in making the change, even if you know it's high risk.
Yeah, and for me, that's an interesting point, because this game kind of diverts from that. Earlier in the season, when it's clear this road thing is a problem, you should try something now, because then if you find a change that works, you can keep riding it. And clearly what you're doing isn't working. This game, however, was different because they came into this road game on a 2-game winning streak, which was obviously very rare for this team. He also had the return of what seemed to be potentially a promising midfield partnership between Maximiano and Fernando Bob, and they returned from suspension. And I wrote about this in the player ratings. It's hard to fault Heath, even though right earlier in the season I called for boldly changing your strategy. It's hard to fault him for not changing, considering they've been on some winning ways recently. He's got full strength as he has at his allotment. That's what he had going into this game with his players. So he starts what we'll call the 4-3-3. Bob, Schuller, and Maximiano in the midfield. Those three in the last month have performed very well. So you'd feel like you could lean on them. Going forward, he had Angelo, Darwin, and Miguel. Another three that have, on the whole, the last few weeks, performed very well. So you would have to feel good about that. I mean, again, Angelo and Darwin are the DPs. They're almost locks at times in the lineup. And Miguel has performed exceptionally well the last few weeks. How could you not feel good about that front six? In addition to that, he's got his captain, Calvo, who's been playing at left back for a lot of this success recently, playing left back. He's got Coleman and Boxall playing in the center, who, those two, you could argue, in addition to Quintero, have been the most consistent guys at times this season. So you got those two playing in center defense, and he's got Jerome Tiaison, who I have numerous times said is the best outside back they possess. And then, of course, you got Shuttleworth in net. So if you're Heath, and I feel bad because I did give him a bad coach rating because it has to reflect on him, but how could you not feel good about that starting lineup? He can't go out there and kick the balls for them.
Well, in looking at your ratings, Tiaison 2, Boxall 2, Calvo 3, gave Bob a 5, but Maximiano 2. You go down the list. I mean, no one's higher than a 5, right? And dysfunction's too far, but I think of when the Twins had the total system breakdown, it's like it was really hard to pinpoint one thing that went wrong there. And so I don't know if it's I tend to believe that the players should be self-motivated to win an elimination game, even if it's away from home. However, maybe in the back of their mind, they're human and they go, we know how this goes, right? As soon as that first goal comes in, the first thing I thought was, man, this is over. And you shouldn't think that. Yeah,
but I agree, and it's the fashion in which that goal happened that I think lends even more credence to the thought that you're bringing up, because it is human nature to know what you do on the road, know how much you struggle, and as soon as Philadelphia starts pumping in the goals, to go, yeah, we're not going to do well tonight. And again, going back to that first goal, I think that was a real catalyst in the game, because the way it happened is a random loose ball in the air, a fairly safe aerial challenge between Boxall and the Philadelphia striker, and Boxall is known for being exceptional in any physical tussle and very good in all aerial duels. And not only does he lose this, but he either just gets beasted off the ball and gets sent to the ground, or he's kind of looking for a foul call. And so he gifts them possession just outside their box. And the dude takes it over. Brent Coleman can't do much about it. And he really leaves everyone in an impossible situation and puts his team down 1-0. And I think that mentally was just killed everyone. Because it just shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, well, and a better team sees that as a fluke and still has confidence they can win the game. This seems like it's just the first domino that falls. And
yes.
Then you go to the 17th minute, and then one of their better players scores in the 23rd. It wasn't until, were they down 3-0, 4-0 when Quintero finally scored, right? It was 4-0?
Yeah, 4-0.
So I mean, a more confident team is less worried about what you're describing there.
Absolutely.
Because it's not part of a trend. Now, do you think if they had, circling back to GM coach, if they have Molino, if they have Finley, I saw those as two pretty major injuries, right?
Yep.
Do you think the road record is at all different, or do you think those are not big enough difference makers?
Like I said, it's the timing.
It makes it hard to judge.
The timing makes it hard to judge. But what's so interesting, as I mentioned earlier, United's lone road win this entire season came in a game Molino and Finley both played in.
Yeah.
I think that speaks volumes. That was literally the game that Kevin Molino tore his ACL. So for me, and especially if I'm Heath, I'm pointing to that. Like when I have my full roster, that's what happens. We can win on the road. Now I think Orlando, the team that they beat in that instance.
Right. They had the motivation of Heath being.
Also that, yes. Yeah. Also that. They're also playing Heath's old team, a stadium he helped design.
That feels like so long ago.
I'm looking back at that game now. Finley scored the 2 goals in that.
Yeah.
So I think that says a lot. I think and so in that way, but look how long it's taken us to get it to notice that it is potentially roster construction.
Yeah.
And so I think now that we've kind of unwrapped all that, boom, you can look and point the finger at Lagos and be like, obviously it's not Lagos' fault that those guys get hurt, but it's Lagos' fault that there's not the right type of depth to replace them or fulfill what's needed now that they're gone. And so right in this really roundabout way, we find out maybe it really is that there's a good amount of blame to be shed on Lagos. But again, it takes all that. I think the quick look is home road split is awful. They can win They can win at home. They can't win on the road. That's a coaching problem. But I don't know that that's the case.
My feel here, and you obviously are closer to the situation, is that I think Lagos and Heath will start the year in their current positions going into the new year. However, I think you're right. I think you get halfway through the season and you want meaningful games at home, especially because they tend to play well at home. Mm-hmm. But if you continue to see these trends, it seems like Heath could be the first one to go and Lagos could go after that. It seems weird to do a GM change in the middle of the season.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine they would do it that way.
Yeah, but I could see do it when the job's most attractive, and the job is probably most attractive after all that momentum of the first season at home. You know what I mean? And I think if you wait too long, all of a sudden the honeymoon period's over and people may be like, this team just has a rep of being not good. Like I think expansion teams occasionally get that label.
Yeah. I mean, unless you can off the cuff think of a very unique or specific sporting example where something like this is taking place, it's really hard to picture, should they feel the need to fire Adrian Heath, that they would go further in the process and fire the GM as well. Yeah. I can't think of it's really incomprehensible in my mind
and they
to picture a situation where they don't fire if they need to fire Heath, hire another coach and give Lagos that coach.
Yeah.
I mean, tell me another instance. It's hard to picture another instance in sports where the coach and GM go that quickly and it's their first go around.
And again, I go back to, this is a different story if you're in the third year in the new stadium, honeymoon period's wearing off, all that stuff. Because like I would look at like the Wild would be the most recent example. They probably just waited too long, right? Doug Risebrough, he was not a great GM. Jacques Lemaire was fine as a guy that started out. Probably should have moved on from him a little bit quicker. And it seemed like, again, this was like a bad team that played in a sweet stadium, you know? And like at a certain point, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how new it is and all that. And so I think if it was an unmitigated disaster this year, the two guys, you know, Heath, Lagos would be on the hot seat. I think you have to sit back and realize this is the second year in the MLS. They still have the honeymoon of the new stadium. There still is a reason to come out. I'm sure the Ramirez trade.
Oh, there is, and then you're gonna get these guys we keep talking about, Molino and Finley back. Yeah, and you know they're gonna make. There's gonna be roster
and you're gonna have
Quintero
as probably your star, right? The guy you're promoting.
I mean, yeah. I still feel. And I'm going to see if I can't dig this up and announce it on the podcast at some point.
Yeah.
Try to get
I love it.
Talking with people. Find out how aggressive they're going to be about getting that DP, that third DP.
Yeah, because
that's going to be really interesting.
And it's something you have to do right because Quintero for sure was right. Jury's still out on Rodriguez.
And it's increased pressure because if you already have the slots filled, the 2 slots filled, if this third one doesn't go well, you don't have much wiggle room. You're out of slots.
The issue with the Ramirez trade, going back to that, is it does put Lagos on the hot seat because that is a player it seems like people really, really liked who succeeded in LA. Is he still doing well? What's the story?
He's definitely cooled way down.
Yeah.
He's not as prominent.
But the DP should always be better than that guy. That's the other weird thing with that, right? A DP should, because and he probably is, but he's not drastically better. He's not
drastically better.
He's not becoming.
He's not proven to be drastically better.
Who are the 3 guys? If you market for them, you for sure do it around Finley, Molino, Quintero, right? That'd be your 3. Who are the 3 guys you're like, we want to sell these?
I think Calvo's gonna get it. You give Calvo a decent amount of market. Shuttleworth, because he's very consistent and definitely going to be in every lineup for the most part.
For sure.
Coleman, too, because he's also like Finley, a local guy.
But your DP should be in that conversation. He's not right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to market him. I don't know that marketing's like that important. But
for a new team, I feel like a little bit.
Quintero can do anything marketing-wise you need.
Sure, for sure.
Because he's so darn good, and you know it. It's just a lock.
He surprised you.
Made the All-Star game.
Yeah, he surprised you with how good he is, right?
Yeah, it's been shocking.
Yeah.
Utterly shocking. Obviously, I knew he'd be good, but...
And Calvo has a national profile. That's the other thing you have to think about, right? Like he
has a mild international profile.
International, sorry. Is what
also made the All-Star team, but as a late call-in.
It seems to be the voice of the team. Is that the
he's the captain.
Yeah.
Yeah, and tries to be the voice of the team.
I mean, he's taking on bloggers.
Yeah, which is awesome. I respect that game for sure. I like it. Yeah. I hope he keeps doing that.
Yeah.
I think another thing that will reflect on Lagos is the fact that who's done their job again, because it does feel like a little bit of a dichotomy between the two of them. Who's done their job longer? And it's by far Adrian Heath. He's coached a lot longer. Has a unbelievable reputation coming from being a star of Everton in England and then coaching in England for high-level teams and then coming here and coaching and doing, having pretty darn good success.
Going back to Orlando City, he was upset that he felt like he was part of the future there.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and when they were in the lower divisions prior to that, he was like winning the league with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now Manny Lagos, this is his first ever experience as a GM. So I think that's very relevant and should. Again, like I said, I think I'm upset with it, and I'm kind of sick of it. The coach getting that brunt of the blame and getting the axe before the GM, but I think that is the natural way of it. It has to be, the GM has to have a longer stay a lot of the time because that's what a GM's job is.
Well, it also just takes a while to implement.
Yeah,
because
exactly. The GM's job is to have the longer term picture. That really, if you simplify the roles, GM is long term picture, coach is immediate picture.
It's why having crazy Tibbs
is a terrible idea. Just gonna cut that right there. But yes, Tibbs. Ugh. But I think that's what I'm trying to articulate and illustrate this scenario that Minnesota United has, because I think it is unique. I think, and I don't think that they'll maybe see it this way, but I think they're in a unique situation where the GM might be who should go first. Heath might be the guy that you want to hold on to and can and should coach this team. And then it's Lagos who might be more part of the problem. I think that there's other people that feel that way.
Do you see, because I think we still should be thinking about the future with this team. As much as you don't want to go into a new stadium and stink, it's really important that as the honeymoon, as the new kind of car smell goes away, that you have a winner. Because otherwise, I think you're going to lose casual fans that you're trying to get into soccer. Do you see a long-term plan? Do you like the youth on the team? Is there something convincing you that would tell you, yeah, this result in Philadelphia stinks? It's going to naturally, people are going to point fingers at the front office and the coaching staff when you have something like this happen. But do you see a trajectory, or do you worry that this is a little bit of, we're putting a winning product on the field, but at least at home, but it's not going to get that much better over time?
I'm a little worried because you've seen everyone in soccer, everyone in MLS has seen the success that Atlanta United has had.
I thought of that immediately.
And it's
and LA to some extent, right?
And LA basically has tried to copy that in some fashions.
But Atlanta's selling out their new football stadium.
They're not only are they getting the on-field product that they want, they're getting the off-field stuff that comes with it that you'd want. And how you don't try to copy that in some way is kind of flabbergasting, because and one of the clear things that Atlanta United's done roster construction wise is go very young. Yeah. Big money, but on young and super talented
they went
players.
3 DPs
and they've gone with a little bit of a veteran presence, adding guys like Darlington Nagbe and what have you, and Brad Guzan. But that team is built around super young guys. Almiron, Barco, Joseph Martinez, all under the age of 25. They had Rookie of the Year their first season. He's obviously a big part of the plans. They just debuted a 16-year-old from their academy in a game like 2 weeks ago. So you can look at that team and be like, wow, you're getting the immediate success, which is fantastic. But should you retain these guys, this success clearly will continue on some level. Yeah. And even if you sell them for a profit and you lose them, you're going to have tons of income that you could do who knows what with.
Yeah, either.
And now you look at Minnesota United, Darwin Quintero is a phenomenal DP. Yeah. Any team in the league would dream to have him. Yeah. And what a coup it was to get him. But he's 31.
Yeah.
31. If you don't already know this and you listen to this podcast, the prime age of a soccer player or the tail end of a soccer career is certainly in your early 30s. You are almost no one remains a productive player beyond the age of 34. Now, the MLS does provide a longer career window because it is not as intense, not as physical, not as fast. Yeah, so guys like David Villa, David Beckham, and Zlatan Ibrahimovic can come here in their mid-30s and produce very well. So I will give them that. But one of the things that Quintero's game is clearly built on is speed, and that is what goes away with age. And we just know that scientifically at this point. So that's concerning. Angelo Rodriguez, 29. Fernando Bob, 30. Ibsen, 35. So a lot of their best players are not up and coming. Kevin Molino, going on his second ACL tear, is now 28. Miguel Ibarra. A lot of people think, wow, what a nice story, what a turnaround, what a come up. Is like, I'm 27 or 28. 27 at the absolute youngest. So.
He is 28.
Exactly. Every player.
Well, and even so, like Abu Danladi is 22, but hamstring issues.
Yeah, Abu Danladi, you start looking at if you go to the younger group. But, I mean, my point being, first, all these hold steadies in the lineup are 28 or older. All the ones I named. And that's concerning. Jerome Tieson, 30. Best outside back you have.
Which makes it weird.
Michael Boxall, 30.
Yeah.
Like, you're telling me if you're not getting immediate success with a veteran lineup, that's concerning.
You also would think the veterans would play better on the road, have the road routine down,
you would
not be intimidated by the.
You would. Boxall was the one who allowed the first goal.
Yeah, and that's what makes the time period interesting, because you do have a little more leash. Again, it would be in a different situation to be like, we'd be cleaning house, right? I mean, they'd be cleaning house there because these players are supposed to be a playoff caliber, playoff caliber team, and it's why people may be saying, "Oh man, you're gonna start pointing fingers before they even get in their stadium," or suggest that these guys only have 1 year to. It's because of the age of the team and their potential.
Yeah,
and if you only watch them at home, you'd be like, "What is this conversation they're having?" But the fact that they're on the road like this, it's incredible.
I know. And so many, it's problematic too. The age discussion, I think, is relevant and it's interesting. And it's problematic because one of the things you notice when you cover this team and you watch all these other MLS teams come into town, they get production and have useful youth products. They're outside backs, they're 20s. Outside mids. You got young players that not only start for them, but like provide game-changing and really useful play. So I think that's another reason that you gotta be a little concerned with this roster at times. And again, not to pile on too much with it, but your best young player, who is fantastic when he can play, is one of the most injury-prone guys I've ever seen. And as I talked about a few episodes ago, and I'm not one. If I'm being hyperbolic, I'll tell you, and it'll be fun because I'll go way over the top and be comical.
Yeah.
But I have to be real with Dunladi in that I've seen trends before, and this trend for him right now, his injury trend, is scary, legitimately scary, because the signs don't point to a good place right now. And it's really hard for me to picture him staying on the field consistently. This was the knock on him coming out of college, and it has held true the entire time.
It's a bummer because he's exciting when healthy.
Oh my gosh, he's very
yeah.
And one of the things that we've heard, the reports we've heard, is that he was actually one of the main reasons that they wanted to trade Ramirez initially, is to give him more minutes. So now that makes that's another factor that starts to make that Ramirez trade look rough.
Yeah.
So yeah, we haven't gone into deep detail about the game. Not that we need to. It was like a car accident. You know bad things happen and you don't really need to know the details.
Well, it looked similar to other
it's so darn similar to the narrative that we know for the road games this season. But yeah, if you missed it or if you're catching up, it did officially eliminate Minnesota United from playoff contention. It clinched playoff berth for Philadelphia for the first time in their franchise history for 4 years. They were on a 4-year drought, and now will be in the postseason. Minnesota, with 3 games remaining, Adrian Heath saying that he still wants to use these games, that they're very important to him, especially the home games.
They're trying to set a record. 50,000 people.
Allegedly, they already have the reports coming out that they've administered and sold the 50,000 plus tickets to set their goal for the largest ever attended Minnesota pro soccer game in history.
Before it was the Kicks, right?
Yep.
In like the 70s or something.
Yeah. The Kicks were able to get 40,000+ a number of times. So, yeah, it'd be very fun and a fun thing for the franchise. And yeah, you better perform well on a night like that. But he's saying, and he's said this for a little while, that these guys' jobs are on the line, and their fit on this team is still being, very much evaluated in these remaining games. So still poignant and relevant stuff remaining for United. You do have to wonder though. Some of these guys are on multi-year deals.
Yeah, do you want to hear? Let me use this quote.
Yeah, let's hear. Yeah,
a lot of those players in the dress, and this is after him saying that he didn't really see a good goal in that game. That basically United, their players messed up more than anything. And he admits that I think in the past he's tipped his cap to a star player on the other team when they score. But he said there's an awful lot to play for. A lot of those players in that dressing room are playing for their futures at Minnesota United. As long as they're putting on the shirt. Or putting the shirt on, they have an obligation to the people that pay good money to come watch them.
And I think that's a very important quote, because I think actually there might be a bit of fakeness in some of it, in him saying that, because how does he phrase it in the quote? That they're playing for their
futures.
For their futures.
United.
But I think there's a number of them who kind of aren't. And it's unfortunately, you actually do have to kind of pontificate that maybe some of them really took the foot off the pedal in this game because of that. Like, Angelo's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. I see where you're going. Yeah.
Darwin's not going anywhere. And now I would excuse Darwin from this conversation, because I felt like he was up for this entire game and played as well as he could, yep. Scored the lone goal. But other guys that are maybe kind of locked into like being here next year, Fernando Bob, Michael Boxall, Francisco Calvo, guys of that nature, guys we don't know, who are maybe on multi-year deals, Jerome Tieson, who knows Schuller, that they knew they were coming back next year. They knew postseason was a hefty long shot, and maybe didn't give that much of a crap about this game. I got to be honest. It's actually, you can't usually go that route, but it's a real possibility.
Yeah, the one negative with older teams, as much as they've experienced and all that, I feel like I don't think they become apathetic. I think they become cynical, and older players see the same thing over and over again and understand inevitabilities. And I think the nice thing about a younger team is that they become irrationally confident sometimes. Yeah. And that's why you see them blow through the playoffs and stuff like that.
Yes.
And I think maybe I'm inclined to believe that's what's going on with an older team that produces this kind of result.
And that's what I'm trying to say too. Yeah, veteran pessimism. It felt like it was on display this weekend as well, potentially. And I think that is what Heath is alluding to in that quote.
Yeah.
So looking forward, it's gonna be really fun to do the remaining shows this season, and eventually kind of a send-off for this season, where we really analyze the season as a whole and pick out, roster selection for who stays, who goes. And I'll try to get some of the inside info on that as I can. Speaking of which, some of that inside info is that the word on the street is that Maximiano will return next season. That's something I got from the inside. One of the other pieces I got was that it's likely that Alexi Gomez does not return. So interesting tidbits there. And I'll look to get a little bit more. I know. Here's another revelation. Again, maybe I buried this a little too deep in the show today. But it has been revealed to me that Darwin Quintero's contract is 3 years.
Huge.
So that's interesting and good to know.
Do we? I think that's all we need to say with United. Is there anything world soccer that you want to discuss briefly before we wrap up?
I don't think so.
I was thinking of a particular coach who his players may have bailed him out of a a job.
I mean, yeah, but we can touch on Manchester United.
We did bring this up before.
Yeah, I'm not that enthusiastic to talk about it. And what's ironic, and you know what? The haters can hate on me for this. People can pile on, like, call me a jerk, call me whatever you want. But this is how I feel. And I honestly, I wish they would have lost that game. So Manchester United this weekend goes down 2-0 Newcastle. There was reports prior to the game that Mourinho was going to be sacked. Then right before the game, there was reports that was crap, that was rubbish, that he actually had the backing of Manchester United. Nevertheless, whatever that was or wasn't, they go into Newcastle, a team they absolutely need to be able to beat, and they're down 2-0.
Yeah, I saw the beginning of the game. It looked like they were toast.
And they come all the way back in stunning fashion, win the game. Very galvanizing for the team and the guys, and Mourinho on some level. But I'm telling you, just like from my perspective, I wanted them to lose. And I know many people think that that's really uncool. But I think ultimately that's what's in the best interest for Manchester United, is to get Mourinho out the door, to move on, to start the process anew. And this is the exact type of thing that just makes it linger on longer.
Yeah.
And it was the exact type of situation that was perfectly set up for him to get sacked. And it's cool on one level. I'm really happy for the guys that they were able to come back and have that performance. But, man, it was the right setup. It's really hard to picture Mourinho surviving Newcastle loss. So yeah, I don't know how to feel, basically. Very similar to how I feel about women these days, to be honest, Tom.
Yeah. Yikes. I think that's all we got for this show. Do you have any other thoughts?
No, we will. We'll catch you guys next time.
Naylor should be back. Yep.
Yeah, we'll get Nay back on the air. You can catch him at Prof Cedar. He's obviously going to be covering United stuff in between shows, as always. We got Tom Schreier at T-Schreier3. Thanks for joining us today, Tom. As always, getting even deeper into the soccer today. I loved it. It's been a fun season. I've learned a lot about soccer this year. Yeah, we're just pulling you along. We're just tied you to the car.
I even watched a little bit of that Man U game.
There you go.
Until I thought that was done, and then it wasn't over.
That warms my heart. Yeah. I'm Nick Hallett. You can catch me on Twitter at Prince Hallett. Catch everything we do at zonecoverage.com, at zonecouragemn on Twitter. It's been great. We'll catch you guys next week. Goodbye for now.